Hello, good evening, and welcome to this edition of Good Evening Ghana. Tonight, we will begin our investigation into this big matter and this big English computer word. Interoperability has become a matter in Ghana over the last 2 weeks or so since the Vice President launched what he called the Mobile Money Interoperability, something like that. It's supposed to be a system that is to unite different platforms in terms of money payment across banks and from mobile phones. Now, this has also become topical and quite political because there was an earlier contract that the new MPP administration inherited. The MPP is telling us that the contract they inherited was to do this work for 4-point-something billion Ghana cedis. Now, they claim that the same job has now been achieved for almost thousands of percentage less than that, something like 15 million Ghana cedis. So tonight, we're here to begin the investigation of the interoperability challenge. We will do it in two parts. First tonight, and later on Thursday evening in the next edition of our show for the week, so that by the time we finish, by the time the week is over, there will be a total comprehensive story, well told from different angles, about the interoperability. Tonight, we'll talk to Gibbs, the man that you've been hearing on the radio and actually earlier tonight on Good Evening Ghana. His name is Hesse, and he's in charge of Gibbs. He will tell us exactly what the Vice President launched. What is the effect of what the Vice President launched? What will it do in terms of the system that has been put in place? How different is that from the system that the NDC was putting in place? We'll also show you a video of a press conference yesterday by the former Deputy Governor of the Bank of Ghana, who had quite a strong response about the differences in the systems. Well, they are claiming that even though theirs is far more expensive, the cost was not to be borne by government. We need to understand that in some detail. So that's for tonight. On Thursday, we'll have a lawyer in the studio who will walk us through the process of the bidding from the time the tenders were received all the way up to the time the award was made. And we'll find out whether there had been some legal pitfalls, etc., etc. Thursday's program promises to be as interesting as tonight. So Mr. Hesse will join us in the studio in a minute. Before then, though, we have an editorial for 17 minutes showing you our opinion on what we found in our research about the history of the University of Ghana. Now, that was a topical issue before interoperability. The president had made a statement at the university, and tongues started wagging, pens were writing, social media was awash with opinions about whether or not the University of Ghana should be renamed after Dr. J.B. Dankwa. So we have an editorial on that, the research, the analysis, and everything that you need to know. That's going to come first. And when that has come, Mr. Hesse will come into the studio. We do the first part of our interoperability challenge. This is Good Evening Ghana. It's live from our studios here in Laboni, broadcasting to you all over the world. And those of you on social media, especially on Facebook outside Ghana, hi, thumbs up to you for watching our show. Here is the editorial.
Ghana, we now have freedom. Ghana, land of freedom. Toils of the brave and the sweat of their labors. Toils of the brave which have brought results.
There's been some controversy about the origin, the history, and the placement of personalities and the roles they played about the University of Ghana. It started actually with the president of Ghana. Nana Akufo-Addo was at the University of Ghana last week to launch the endowment fund of the university. The university has been discussing an endowment fund for a very long time. Eventually, it came to fruition and the president launched the endowment fund. During the launch of the endowment fund, this is what the president said.
The leadership of this great scholar and nationalist, who was described in his lifetime as the doyen of Gold Coast politics, that enabled the Ghanaian people to reject the original decision of the colonial government that a single university be established in Ibadan in Nigeria for British West Africa, and get it to agree to the establishment of a separate university for our country. How felicitous was that decision, and how greatly it has contributed to the growth of modern Ghana. It would be wholly appropriate and not at all far-fetched to describe Joseph Boakye Dankwa as the founder of this university, a fact which on the 70th anniversary of its existence should be vividly recalled by all of us who are the beneficiaries of his work.
Okay, so after that, people began to dig the history and controversy all over the place. And people began to assess the situation. And there were even suggestions that the president is preparing the ground for the renaming of the University of Ghana after Dr. J.B. Dankwa. Is that what the president was trying to do? I don't know. But what we want to do tonight, because we here on Good Evening Ghana have always been interested in history, we'd like to look at the history that we have found, share it with you, and we can all make an individual determination as to the future position of naming, if there should be a name at all, of the University of Ghana. So we have been digging deep, and I'm sure by now you have read social media and seen all sorts of dimensions to the story. One of the main important source books for the history of the University of Ghana, and that's also quite disappointing, we'll come back to that at the end of the program, is disappointing that until 1998 there was no historical document put together by the University of Ghana. Thanks be to G.F. Daniel, the registrar, and Professor Adom-Otchere. They invited a historian, Professor Adom-Otchere, to put this book together, the history of the University of Ghana. So a lot of the information that people have been talking about is drawn from this book and other sources. But we can now look at the history and discuss it. So there was first a situation where the British, who colonized some West African countries, in particular Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and the Gambia, were considered as one in terms of the West African territories. And the British wanted to advance the learning of the people, and so they decided to set up a university in Ibadan. Indeed, a committee, an Elliott committee, was set up, which was to look at the feasibility of setting up a university college in West Africa for the West African people to facilitate the civil service arrangement of the British imperial rule. Now, majority of the members of this Elliott committee thought that there should be each individual territory, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Nigeria, or Sierra Leone, Gold Coast, Nigeria, should all have separate university colleges. The minority opinion of the Elliott Committee, however, was to the effect that there should be one set up in Ibadan in Nigeria. And so that minority opinion seemed to hold sway with the British government sitting in Westminster. And so it was announced around the Gold Coast that there will be a university college that will be set up in Ibadan. By this time, Adom-Otchere School was already in existence here in Ghana. And so the agitations began against this position. The University of Ghana's own website records as follows. The British government at first accepted the minority report of the Elliott Commission and declared that a university college for the whole of British West Africa should be established at Ibadan, Nigeria. But the people of the Gold Coast could not accept this recommendation. Led by scholar and later politician J.B. Dankwa, they urged the Gold Coast government to inform the British government that the Gold Coast could support, and that's very instructive, we'll come to understand what that means. The Gold Coast could support a university college. The British government accordingly reviewed this decision and agreed to the establishment of the university college. Now, that's what the University of Ghana website says. It says that the people of Ghana decided that they didn't want a university in Ibadan for their children, and that, in fact, the Gold Coast could support an establishment of a university college. Now, two things made this possible. Two key things made this possible. The first one was the establishment of Adom-Otchere School, or shall I say the existence of Adom-Otchere School. Now, Adom-Otchere School has been set up in 1924 or so, and it was doing very well, and it was the pride of the nation. In fact, if you go to the book written by Adom-Otchere, he talks about Adom-Otchere being the pride of the nation at that time. And so many petitions that went against the establishment of a university in Ibadan cited Adom-Otchere as a basis for setting up a university. And so Adom-Otchere School and its existence and its pride and its excellent work was an important factor in the arguments that were made, led by J.B. Dankwa, for the establishment of a university in Ghana. The other one was cocoa money. And many times we have learned that cocoa money was instrumental in what occurred in Ghana from 1940 all the way up to 1957. And cocoa money was going to be used to support, as it were, because the British were saying to the Gold Coasters that if you want a university, demonstrate that you can support it. And so they set up a Bradley committee to have a look at whether the Gold Coast could actually find funding to be able to achieve a university college. And all of this led by Dankwa, including especially talking to the cocoa farmers about getting the cocoa farmers to spend some money. You know, and the book again, Elliott's book again, talks about how Dankwa was seen around the country talking to cocoa farmers and inviting them to pay some money towards the establishment of the university. But all of these cocoa farmers were controlled, of course, by the Asantehene in those days, in the 1940s. So guess what happened? The Bradley Committee sent a delegation to the Asantehene. That was Nana Adjama Prempeh II. And Prempeh II was convinced by the committee and other people, including Dankwa, of course, that if they were to set up a university with cocoa money in Accra, the next university will be set up in Kumasi. It was to be called the Kumasi Technology College. That's what has become today the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. So that's the story, that's the history, factually determined that the British wanted to set up a university in Nigeria. The Ghanaian people said no, led by Dankwa. They wrote petitions, they made arguments, and then they went to the Asantehene for funding. And the Asantehene said that, well, if we fund it, if cocoa farmers fund it, would you promise me that you set up a university college for my people in Kumasi? And the Bradley Committee reported in the book, the Bradley Committee promised the Asantehene that yes, that was going to happen. They were going to set up a university college in Kumasi. So if you look at the conversations about the origins of the University of Ghana, the University College in Ghana, that conversation also produced another university. It produced the University of Science and Technology. So in one conversation, there were two universities set up, one to be set up immediately and the other to be set up later. This was the state of affairs in the 1940s, and this is the history of the University of Ghana. As you see, the University of Ghana's website captures it very succinctly in this manner. So this is the history that we have been discussing about the University of Ghana. Now let's move on. Let's now talk about, naming institutions and monuments after certain people. Why do we do that? We do that because certain people live exemplary lives, and we want to name them after monuments that we always engage with so that we shall never forget the name. And we do that also so that posterity will learn. If a monument is named after Mr. X, posterity would ask, who is Mr. X? And they are told who Mr. X is. And if that life is exemplary, posterity can also emulate that life, and the children can emulate that lives. It creates a culture, it creates a history of a great people. And that's the reason why monuments are named all over the world, whether it's in England where they are naming after a rail line, whether it's in America where they are naming airports after John Kennedy, whether it's in Ghana where we are naming airports after the General Kotoka, and whether we are naming circles after Kwame Nkrumah and universities after Kwame Nkrumah. So that's why we do these things. There is also another reason. When people have worked towards creating an institution, an establishment, sometimes we recognize them by naming it after them. If they turned out to be excellent people, for instance, for a university, if it was a scholar and he had an excellent exemplary life, he wrote a lot, then you can name it after him. So that is the context within all of which that is the context within which we are having this discussion. Recently, the president named or suggested naming two monuments after important people. The Colossal Par Grant, which was the Takwa School of Mines, which is now to be named after Par Grant, and also the Wa Polytechnic, which is to be named after Dr. Liman, who was the president in the Third Republic. Dr. Liman won the first second round election that had ever been fought in Ghana and became president of the Third Republic. So far, not much has been done. Recently, during the anniversary of the Liman Foundation, the president made that announcement. So one for Par Grant and the other one for Dr. Liman. Have a look.
This hat piece ceremony is for me in two parts. The second relates to the decision taken by the Council of Umat in accordance with the statutes of the university to rename this institution after George Alfred Grant, the legendary Exim-born entrepreneur, Par Grant. It is a most excellent decision which has received the agreement of the President of the Republic, so that once the parliamentary process has been completed, this university will be called the George Grant University of Mines and Technology. We're gathered not to mourn the passing of Dr. Hilal Imam, a sad event which occurred 20 years ago, but to celebrate the life of an eminent Ghanaian, a distinguished diplomat, statesman, and above all, a patriot. It is appropriate that on this occasion of commemoration of the 20th anniversary of his death, I announce with pleasure that the Governing Council of Wa Polytechnic in the Upper West region, at its meeting on Thursday, 18th January 2018, unanimously proposed to the dynamic Minister for Education, Honorable Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh, Member of Parliament for Menchia South, that the institution should be renamed after Dr. Hilla Liman.
So yes, that's why we name monuments after people. There were a bit of political concern from the president's political opponents, and they cited, for instance, that Dr. Dankwa happens to be his uncle. I don't know. I think we also heard that his mother's uncle, so perhaps maybe it is his grand uncle, but definitely there's a relationship between the president, Akufo-Addo, and Dr. J.B. Dankwa for sure. And people were worried that president was perhaps drawing attention to his family members and wanting to name the university after his uncle or is it grand uncle. But he also named Takwa after Pa Grant and Dr. Liman. Is it to say that because those were not his relatives, it is okay? And as soon as he mentions his relative's name, it's a problem. I think the problem and the concern should be with the facts. Let's deal with the facts. If the facts are as it is, we must give credit where it is due. I don't even know whether the name of the university should be renamed at all. But in terms of the history, Dr. Dankwa has a place in it. Now, part of why we have this problem and part of why we have come to this situation is the point I made in the beginning. Up until 1998, there was no record of the University of Ghana. No record, absolutely. And we are grateful to Professor Adai Mensah and Registrar Daniel, who decided that on the 50th anniversary of the university, there has to be documentation about the university, and asked Professor Abodeka, who graciously accepted. He's a historian of very high repute, Professor Abodeka. He graciously accepted to put up this history that we are all talking about. As we looked at this information, we tried to look at whether Dr. Nkrumah himself had something to say about it, and we didn't find. In fact, Dr. Dankwa himself didn't write anything about the formation of the University of Ghana. Dr. Nkrumah wrote an autobiography of himself from 1909 to 1957. And it is regrettable that no mention was made in the book, in this particular book. There's absolutely no mention of the university and its formations. Even the University College of Technology in Kumasi, after which today Dr. Nkrumah is named, he did not write anything about it in his autobiography in the entire 310 pages. That was regrettable, because if that had happened and if other people had written, we will not be here quarreling and scrambling over history, Googling things that were not recorded by Google at the time, and having all the difficulties we are having. So let's encourage our people, our members of parliament, our ministers, our president, to make documents and write books about what they've done. Perhaps corporate Ghana should set up a fund that will be used to finance some of these writings. President Mahama has written a book, My First Coup d'etat. He wrote it when he was vice president. And so we encourage other people to write books and document the things that have happened, so that 50 years later, when people want to know what happened in Ghana 70 years ago, they can pick up a book, an autobiography, and look at it. Dr. Nkrumah did not say anything about the University of Ghana, even though he's captured here in this photograph at the opening of a Kwafo Hall when he was leader of government business. Dr. Nkrumah was there. And so we have to decry that as well, that people should write and should document. But all in all, the question still remains, should the University of Ghana be renamed? And if the University of Ghana should be renamed, should it be renamed after Dr. J.B. Dankwa, who the university says was the pivotal move to establish the university? One more group of people, the cocoa farmers, have to be mentioned. Now, if you look at the cocoa farmers and the role they played, they raised at least 897,000 pounds, almost £1 million in 1948 for the university. What has happened to the cocoa farmers? We can look at Ekwafo Hall, which has been established for farmers. And at the establishment of Ekwafo Hall, Dr. Nkrumah attended the ceremony. It was a high-profile event to reward the cocoa farmers. There's another group of people. In fact, the university, even though it began in Achimota, it is now situated on the land of the Labadi people. What do we do with the Labadi people as well? The people of Labadi, or the people of La, the chiefs and people of La, gave the land where the university is now situated. Shall we mention them one way or the other in it? Perhaps we can look at it, but we always have to give credit where credit is due. In terms of renaming the university after a scholar, should we name it after J.B. Dankwa? If you ask me, I think that Dr. Dankwa deserves it. Okay, so you can agree or disagree. Send us your comments on Facebook, Good Evening Ghana Official. As I said, we're on the first bus ride of the Interoperability Challenge. Mr. Adom-Otchere has joined me in the studio. He's in charge of games. Good evening, sir.
Good
it's
evening,
a pleasure.
Paul.
It's been a very heated week
Tedious,
for
a
you.
very tedious week for
And
me.
you've had a long day. When did you start your day this morning?
Today I started around 7 o'clock.
As early as that?
Precisely, yes.
And you've been talking on radio?
Talking continuously on radio.
I see.
I actually went to support a fintech company as well. And yeah.
So what's your own background? Are you an IT person?
I'm a physicist, yes.
Oh, physics?
Physicist.
Okay, so
I have
that's
a physics degree.
physics degree?
Precisely.
Oh, that's tight. That's very technical.
Precisely.
Okay, the only thing I remember from physics is the light experiment. Do they still do it?
I'm sure they stood.
Okay, so you have been put in this political situation as
Really?
GIPS, yes, because you have implemented something that has generated political commentary. How much
fair
is the
comment.
cost of this? Okay, first of all, what is it? What did the vice president launch? The so-called, it's a very big word, interoperability. What does it mean?
Interoperability is the ability for two things to do something together.
Okay.
So when you
Is
bring
that
it,
IT
when you
word
bring
or
it,
English or?
I think I met someone who said to me that I'm one of the few people who use the word, but it's an English word. It's in the
Okay.
dictionary.
Okay.
However, if we bring it into context, mobile money interoperability is simply the possibility of crossing, transferring funds across network.
But don't we do that already?
And that's basically what it is.
Don't we do that already?
Currently, what happens is that...
That means can I transfer funds from MTN mobile money to Tigo Cash?
Precisely.
We do that, don't we?
Yeah, well, in the domestic sense, what we currently have, or before we launched our mobile money interoperability, is we had a couple of fintech companies that were supporting the process. And what they had was they had all the wallets in their well, they had all the wallets.
All the wallets means what?
All the mobile money wallets.
So MTN,
Tigo.
So the company whose platform on which we're doing the transfer had all the wallets. That's what you're saying.
Precisely.
Okay.
And if you want to cross, for example, from MTN to Vodacash, what they will do is they will collect your MTN into their MTN wallet, and they will use their Vodacash wallet and send it to you. That system would work, but as soon as you get to the commercial level, that's when you start breaking. What we have is at the switch level, and that's the commercial interoperability.
So that means what? You have replaced the fintech companies?
Well, it's a better way of actually doing it.
Do they still have
Performing
business, or are they
that-
out of business?
Well, in life, when a particular service that you offer has been replaced, you look at an alternative way. But the fintech companies, we work very closely with them, and they have their place, and they are happy to play in those roles. Yeah.
Okay, so what you've done now, what the vice president launched is that now if I'm transferring MTN mobile money to Tigo Cash, what happens?
Right. What happens basically is that you can go onto your phone and you can transfer it seamlessly, as opposed to the time it takes.
Do I pay less?
Certainly. That's
I pay
the whole-
less.
Precisely.
So the
yeah.
mobile money charges have gone down. Is that what it is?
Well, so far as I'm concerned, when it comes to transferring across, it has gone down. Previously, from studies, the charges were between 2.5% of the value up to 3%. What is currently being charged is a maximum of 1.5%. The mobile money networks are free to decide on what charges they want to levy on their customers, but it must be below the 1.5% up to 15 cedis, and that's where it is capped.
Does what you have done also bring volumes? Does it mean I can transfer higher volumes of money?
Yes, you can, precisely.
Seamlessly?
Seamlessly, yes.
And
Exactly.
pay what kind of charge?
Exactly what I've said, 1%, 1.5% of the value. So let's say, for example, if you transfer 100 cedis, you pay 1.5% of 100 cedis is 1 cedi, 50 pesos.
Yes.
And it goes up all the way till you transfer 10,000 cedis, and then you pay, 15 cedis. If you transfer 12,000, you still pay the 15 cedis. So it goes all the way till it gets to 15 cedis, and that's where it stops.
So 10,000 is 15 cedis. 15,000 is also 15 cedis. Is that what you're saying?
The 1.5% of 10,000 is what? Is it 15 cedis, isn't it?
Well, can't do it.
I think
now.
1,000 cities is 15 cities.
Yes.
I don't know the maths.
Okay.
I'm too tired.
But you're saying that you get to a certain level and then
and then
it
it's stopped.
remains
It's
there.
capped. That's right. Yeah.
So no matter how much you transfer beyond that level, you still pay
you
the
still
same
pay the
rate.
15 cities. That's right. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
So if you compare it to what it was before, it's cheaper and it's more efficient. So
And this
we
cost
have
us
actually
what, 4 million
modernized-
cities or $4 million?
Well, I think I've explained this thing time and time again since this. I think this incident happened. GIPS, by our remit, is to modernize the payment systems in the country. If you recollect, our first system that we turned out was the e-switch, and then we modernized the check clearing system, followed by ACH direct credit, and then ACH direct debit. We then moved on to create a shared platform which we christened GH Link. So you and I are able to use our local cards on other banks' ATMs. Then we created a shared platform, if you can use the word interoperability, for ATMs, interoperability for the POS, interoperability for e-commerce. And then finally, we came up with the instant interbank transfer, where you can transfer your funds from your bank account into another bank account within seconds, which we christened GIP. That's the instant transfer which the banks are using. Now, all these services rides on the GH Link platform. As you can imagine, I've mentioned a whole host of applications or services that's riding on this platform. Now, if you want to add more to it, we've got to the stage where there is a need for us to refresh all the systems. And in order for us to refresh it, we took into considerations what we currently need up to what we would need in the next 5 years, because the lifespan of most of the systems is roughly 5 years. Everything together is what we calculated and came to roughly 4.5 million. And
Of
we
US
asked-
dollars or of Ghana cedis?
US dollars, that's right, yeah.
So the point you're making is that the 4.5 million
It's not just
it's
for
not just the mobile money
precisely.
interoperability.
It's for us to maximize our capacity or refresh our systems up to the next 5 years.
Okay, so who was this money paid to?
Well, the objective of GIPS, GIPS is a wholly owned subsidiary of the central bank, 100%. And our remit is to ensure that we come out with products and services that would expand or enhance financial inclusion and also migrate Ghana into a cashless society. These are our two main objectives. And of course, there's a need for us to operate and be sustainable, not to be profitable, but to be sustainable. So when it gets to stages where we need to embark on major projects, we can go to our parent who, at the end of the day, gave us the mandate to operate on their behalf to give us a loan. So we actually took the loan from the central bank to be paid back to refresh our systems.
So the point you're making is that the money was paid to GIPS.
It was given to GIPS by the central bank.
The central bank bore the cost and paid to GIPS, which is a subsidiary.
We
of the
borrowed money from...
No, I don't even need the details. I'm coming now to the big elephant in the room, which is a comparison between the politicians. One says, I spend this, the other says, I spend that. Okay. Did this government inherit a contract purportedly to achieve this?
GIPS was set up in 2007 by the central bank.
That's a long time ago, yeah.
Precisely, yeah. The central bank is a regulatory body. Yet the central bank still has responsibility for the payment systems. When it comes to the payment systems, we have the regulatory side and then we have the infrastructure side. Now, because most central banks are regulatory in nature and they tend to be economists, they can outsource the infrastructure arm of the payment systems. That is basically what GIPS is. So what the central bank did at the time was to form a wholly owned subsidiary. I'm sure you remember they had lots of engagements with the banks, and they wanted the banks to be involved. The banks were dragging their feet, etc. And the central bank took the challenge upon themselves and then set the whole thing up because of the ultimate benefit that it comes with. At that moment, we were given a mandate to come up with a biometric smart card system, which we called e-switch, to modernize the check clearing environment, including ACH direct credit and ACH direct debit, which I've spoken about, and to create an interoperable platform that would allow all banks to share in order to reduce the cost of transactions in the country. Now, when we talk about interoperable platforms, it includes a whole range of products. ATM interoperability, POS interoperability, mobile money interoperability, and so on and so forth. So that was part of our mandate from ab initio.
Well, my question is, did the government inherit a contract to deliver this?
Which government?
The MPP administration that took over in January 2017. Did they inherit a contract
I can't
already
talk.
awarded to SIPTIM?
That's the question, Paul. I can't talk. You have to ask. I'm the CEO of GIPS, so I'm not quite privy to any contracts that any political parties inherit, etc.
When were you told to get ready to put up this system?
Sometime around, is it May last year or so?
That's when you were told to get ready to put in the system.
That's when we were challenged by the Vice President to ensure that interoperability becomes a reality in Ghana per our mandate in November.
Okay, so now that you've done the implementation, there's concern that, and the Vice President did say it, didn't he, at the launch, about the NDC billing 4.6 billion to do the same thing, which has now been done for far less. What do you know about that?
In terms of the contract that we've all read about, etc., I've been reading about, I haven't seen it myself. So I can't comment on the contract, but we've all heard the figures in question. I'm not quite sure whether the figure was the cost for the procurement or whether the cost for the cash flow for 15 years. I've read so many things. But what I know is that the funds that we actually asked the central bank to support us with to refresh our systems over 5 years, which would cater for all the services that we are currently operating, and the services that we are going to develop and operate, we would need $4.5 million to implement.
Let me do some text, and I'll come to this question about the big elephant in the room. Anyway, viewers, if you are still watching, or you are just joining us, this is Good Evening Ghana, and we are live, and we are talking about interoperability. I've already said that there's a first part of our investigation into this interoperability challenge. On Thursday, we'll have another part that will be substantial in terms of the run of the contract and everything that went about it. Okay. Nunu Manche says that, Paul, you're running one of the best educative social-political talk shows in Ghana. Very informative, in-depth, intellectual. Thank you very much, Nunu. I think he's referring to the editorial. Great minds at work, Ibrahim says. Now, a coin team says, I tried to transfer money from MTN to another network, and it wasn't possible. It only gave me the old instructions. That's to generate a token. Isaac says, I was able to transfer from my Vodafone cash to my MTN mobile. So perhaps there are some hiccups in the beginning of the process. Is it true? Could it be true?
No. I mean, the specific MTN point that you've made, I also heard about it, and I actually used it. And if you go to the MTN menu, at the bottom it says to other networks. And if you click it, that will take you to the other options that are available. So I would ask the person in question to either contact the MTN call center. It's important, Paul, to note that since we actually launched the project, on Thursday in question, we had about 3,000 transactions. And since then, we've been averaging around 3.8 transactions. So we acquire 3.5 thousand transactions per day.
Is that high? Does mobile money not do millions of transactions every day?
It's important to note that to know that we're talking about number of transactions. That's number one. Number two, don't forget that MTN occupies, I think, about 90+% of the mobile money space, yeah. Precisely, yeah. So the probability of a transaction crossing from MTN to the other networks, or the probability of transactions within MTN is far larger than
and you don't come in. If you are dealing within the same network, you don't come in.
Precisely.
You are the inter.
We are the inter and not the intra. Okay. So we don't look at within. Within is within the networks, and that's not part of our remit. But when it comes to inter,
I know you don't like the political questions, but during the political brouhaha, a press conference was held by a man who has left office at the Bank of Ghana. He was a former deputy governor, and he made statements about this matter. He said that the contract that the Bank of Ghana had been dealing with in relation to the old one was to do far more than what had been achieved. I'd like you to hear him and then come back to the studio and tell us whether you agree with what he's saying or not. So let's go and see that press conference. We captured it from the internet. The video may not be very professional, but it's audible and you can hear him. Here is the former deputy governor of the central bank.
I cannot keep quiet for issues to get mixed up and for the wrong impressions to be taken. The bid that was submitted was assessed based on due process. There were no infractions at all in the tender process. No laws were broken, and the Yoko investigation can attest to that. If I look at the details, if I look at the RFP document right here, if I look at the scope of work in the original contract as stated here, it goes far beyond what was launched last week. So it is like comparing an antelope and an elephant. I'm not sure the price will be the same. So that is why I'm saying that the whole argument is needless. Even if it was the same scope, remember that the IT sector, you could buy something from China, an equipment from China, for a specific purpose. You could buy it from the US, 5 times the cost, for the same purpose. There will be differences in the pricing. Why? Because the efficiency won't be the same for the two equipment. More so, bear in mind that the so-called 4.6, for which a selective tendering was conducted, etc., did not, there was nothing on us that we're going to spend any such money. What it was that the investor had projected that over a period of 15 years, it's not as though from day one they were going to spend $1 billion. They are saying that over a period of 15 years, and by which time we would have delivered the entire scope as in the RFP, we expect to have spent that amount of money. Now, what we said again in the RFP was that the pricing, or in terms of the charges to consumers, are the ways they are going to have to recover their investment. Let's keep the central bank with the sanctity it deserves. Areas where it has to execute its mandate, let's not interfere. Let's just leave them alone. It's a peculiar institution, and I don't think that politics should find its way there. I cannot keep quiet for issues to get mixed up and for the wrong impressions to be taken. The bid that was submitted was assessed based on due process. There were no infractions at all in the tender process. No laws were broken, and the Yoko investigation can attest to that. If I look at the details, if I look at the RFP document right here, if I look at the scope of work in the original contract as stated here, it goes far beyond what was launched last week. So it is like comparing an antelope and an elephant. I'm not sure the price will be the same. So that is why I'm saying that the whole argument is needless. Even if it was the same scope, remember that the IT sector, you could buy something from China, an equipment from China, for a specific purpose. You could buy it from the US, 5 times the cost, for the same purpose. There will be differences in the pricing. Why? Because the efficiency won't be the same for the two equipment. More so, bear in mind that the so-called 4.6, for which a selective tendering was conducted, etc., did not, there was nothing on us that we're going to spend any such money. What it was that the investor had projected that over a period of 15 years, it's not as though from day one they were going to spend $1 billion. They are saying that over a period of 15 years, and by which time we would have delivered the entire scope as in the RFP, we expect to have spent that amount of money. Now, what we said again in the RFP was that the pricing, or in terms of the charges to consumers, are the ways they are going to have to recover their investment. Let's keep the central bank with the sanctity it deserves. Areas where it has to execute its mandate, let's not interfere. Let's just leave them alone. It's a peculiar institution, and I don't think that politics should find its way there. I cannot keep quiet for issues to get mixed up, and for the wrong impressions to be taken. The bid that was submitted was assessed based on due process. There were no infractions at all in the tender process. No laws were broken, and the Yoko investigation can attest to that. If I look at the details, if I look at the RFP document right here, if I look at the scope of work in the original contract as stated here, it goes far beyond what was launched last week. So it is like comparing an antelope and an elephant. I'm not sure the price will be the same. So that is why I'm saying that the whole argument is needless. Even if it was the same scope, remember that the IT sector, you could buy something from China, an equipment from China, for a specific purpose. You could buy it from the US, 5 times the cost, for the same purpose. There will be differences in the price.
Okay, so we are grateful to him for coming out of his retirement to at least help us understand the matter. On our social media page and text messages coming in, George Mante says a lot of education going on. Thanks, he says to Mr. Hesse. And Cromwell Quay says, what does he mean by 3.5 thousand? He should be clear with the figures. Daniel Bridge says the visionless vice president scam and fraud Ghana of GPS and its ends, you at some one. It's not clear and it's a bit brutal. Daniel, reorganize your statement. What do you have to say about what we just saw?
A couple of points. The first and foremost, I think before we listened in, you wanted me to compare the scope of what we have deployed to what was in the RFP. I don't know what was in the RFP from what he said, because he says if you look at the scope, it wasn't spelled out, so I can't compare. But I can tell you what we have developed. What we have comes in 3 phases. Well, 2 phases. The first phase would enable all mobile networks to be for individuals to be able to cross. Secondly, if you have funds in your mobile network wallet, you'll be able to send it or transfer it into your bank account. Thirdly, if you have funds in your bank account and you access it through your bank's portal, you will be able to push it into your mobile wallet. This is what we call phase 1. Phase 2 is the ability to pool funds from your bank account into your mobile wallet. Thirdly, is to have the ability whereby you can send funds from your mobile wallet into your eSwitch wallet. So these are the 2 phases that we are going to complete. It's also important for viewers to know and to have the confidence that the systems that we use at GIPS are one of the high standards in the world. Our hardware is IBM, and the switch that we use we bought them from HPS. It's called Power Card. And it's the same switch that is used in Morocco, the UAE, Dynas Card. So these are international switches that we use. I'm just stating facts, but not comparing anything. I just want viewers to know what we have at GIPS, to give them the confidence that we have one of the highest and the best systems
so is the work complete?
At GIPS. When it comes to the mobile money work, the phase 1 is completed. That was what was launched.
What's in phase 2?
Phase 2 was the ability for individuals to be able to pool funds from their bank account, from their mobile wallet into from their bank account, from their mobile phone into their mobile wallet, and also the ability for one to be able to move funds between their mobile wallet and their eSwitch wallet, which we have up to the 10th of July to complete.
Within 4 million? Or that's new money?
Not just $4 million, not just these phase 1, phase 2, but everything else that we would accomplish in the next 5 years.
So the next phase means I can send money from my phone to my eSwitch card?
Precisely.
Can I also send it to my regular ATM card, like a Visa?
You don't send funds to your ATM card. You send funds to your bank account.
Yes.
And you can use your card to have access to it. As we speak now, Paul, you'll be able to practice that. If you have mobile...
On the interoperability that's been done.
Precisely.
If I have mobile money, I can send funds to my bank accounts at...
As we speak now, you can do it now.
Funds from where?
From your mobile wallet.
If I have a mobile wallet.
Precisely.
Okay. That means if you have sent to me mobile money...
If you have one and it's funded, and you have funds in there.
Say if I have 1,000 in there.
Precisely.
I can send that 1,000 to my bank account.
Not only to your bank account, to any bank account in the country.
To another person?
To another person,
Can I send it abroad?
No. We are talking about Ghana.
If I'm abroad and I'm roaming on my phone and you send me funds, can I... Is it the same?
No. I mean, what we do at GIPS is we look at the domestic market.
But if it's my same number, same phone, I'm just roaming on it. If I'm abroad, it's my same number.
Yeah, but who would send it to you?
If anyone sends me money to the number, will it show up when the phone is abroad?
I believe so. It's network connectivity, isn't it? And once there's network, you still receive it. And you can still transfer and carry all the various transfers from wherever you are once the network is connected.
Can I buy now?
Can you buy what?
From a shop. So I go to a shop, a retail shop, and I want to buy chewing gum. Can I do that?
Using your mobile money to make purchases.
Yes.
Yes, from what I went around over the weekend, and a couple of merchants accept mobile money as a form of payment. What we want to do as a country is to encourage that. And what that will bring as well is, Paul, if you have come across a merchant who accepts MTN mobile money, if you have your Tigo, Airtel Tigo, or you have your Voda Cash, you'll still be able to transact with the person. And that is the beauty of interoperability.
Okay, many messages coming. One says, will this system enable me to move funds between one bank account and the other?
Right. We have a system that we call the GIPS Instant Pay. And that is the function. That's the function of that particular system. So if you want to move funds from one bank to the other, you use the GIPS Instant Pay. Some banks call it Instant Pay for short. So if you go into your bank's portal and you know the beneficiary's bank account, you can type it in, opt for Instant Pay, and within seconds,
someone should ask you whether the Bank of Ghana has capacity to monitor this, in terms of monitoring of the whole process by Bank of Ghana.
As we speak now, you have to ask Bank of Ghana whether they can monitor the transactions. But at GIPS, we can see all the various transactions that occur.
I see. Okay, another one. Oh, sorry. Okay, another one. John Boydie says that how much will it cost? How much will phase 2 cost, Mr. Hesse?
You've
answered that question already.
Yeah,
that is 4 million for the entire process.
For the entire process, including up to the next 5 years, whatever.
How many phases will you be doing in 5 years?
Well, we have, when it comes to mobile money interoperability, we have phase 1 and phase 2 only. But there are so many other payment systems products that we will be bringing out or turning out in the next 5 years. And they are all part of the 4.5
Adam
million.
Kofi says, this government is the best we have had in the Fourth Republic. God bless Nanado and Baumia for their timely intervention. Another one says, listen to his defense. And that's referring to the video that we showed. You can buy something from China for a purpose and buy the same thing from the United States 5 times the price because of efficiency, unquote. The questioner says, what are the differences in efficiency? So that differences is what was cost us 3.9 billion. He can't even convince himself. Okay, so we keep the messages coming. Kwabena Fusue Japan says, yes, I always send people mobile money to their mobile wallet. It works with an app called Wave. Ghana really working again under the government. What's Wave? Do you know
I
something
believe Wave is one of the fintech companies, the alternative methods before the mobile money interoperability came into force, into being.
Okay, Mr. Pepra says that I am in the Middle East right now. Thank you for watching all the way from the Middle East. What time is it in the Middle East? Says I'm in the Middle East now and I'm sending money on my mobile money and it's working, he says. It's working. Okay, Dixon says, Paul, if you are abroad and you are roaming, mobile money and interoperability work perfectly. Okay, I've never tried it. I've used this severally and many were surprised and do not even believe I was out of the country. Okay, so that means it runs on the network, isn't it?
It's a network. Once you have the network, it would work.
So you can't answer the question whether the first contract was corrupt or not.
I don't even, I've never even seen a contract before. I can't answer to something I haven't seen. I can tell you everything that pertains what we do at GIPS, what type of systems we use, and you can be the best judge as to whether...
Why, if you have to say something in defense of GIPS, why shouldn't this be a private sector run operation? Why is Bank of Ghana creating a company to do it? Depriving the private sector of business, isn't it?
No. It's important to look at the development of national payment systems in the world. Most of them are owned by the banks.
The central banks?
No.
Or the commercial banks?
The commercial banks in the country. That's the practice. There are one or two countries where it's in the hands of private, for example, the UK, but it's very fragmented. But 80% is owned by the banks. When the central bank decided to embark on this journey, i.e. to establish GIPS, the offer was given to the banks, I don't know if you recall, and the banks at that time were not interested, and the central bank decided to go solo.
Okay, we have Kwejo Ofori Anyenem. He's watching from New Zealand, and he says, good job to us. Thank you, for Kwejo, for watching from New Zealand. Was a time in New Zealand. Ghanaians are connecting all over onto this show. Kwame from La Paz, I think I've put your questions. Thank you very much for coming through. He says, what's the ability to monitor? Does the 4.6 million take care of that too? I think it does. He says it's a process of 5 years. And that's Kwame from La Paz who reached us. It's 6 minutes to the top of the hour. I'll let you go to bed, Mr. Hesse. You've done a good job. We are disappointed that you couldn't answer all the questions.
Well,
but on Thursday, we will continue with other people who can answer that.
Thank you
Congratulations,
very much.
And we hope that you will stay in the job for a very long time.
Thank you, sir.
And that's Mr. Hesse. He's a man on the beat with all of these interoperability. We haven't finished. We have just tried to understand what happened. On Thursday, we will look at what should have happened, what didn't happen, and why is somebody being accused of something. You can't miss that one, can you? Good evening, Ghana will be live again on Thursday. Thanks for watching and good night.